Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Your Views on the News with me, Azad Ali. Over the last few weeks, France has been pouring troops into Mali in West Africa. The French have stated that their aim is to remove rebel groups thought to be allied to Al-Qaeda, who they say have started a war against the Malian government and killed innocent people. Other countries, including Britain, USA and Canada, are playing a non-combat role in support of the operation, whilst African countries are sending troops to help the French. Here's Amanda Thomas Johnson with more.
Scenes in Timbuktu as French troops take the city from fleeing rebels without a shot being fired. During their retreat, it was alleged that rebels torched a priceless manuscript library containing a record of Mali's majestic, legendary, thousand-year history. The melting away of rebels may indicate that this war will be over quickly, though this may just be a case of rebels regrouping before launching an insurgency, something some senior figures have also echoed.
From the security point of view, I think this can be sorted out fairly quickly because there's only a few hundred fighters. I don't think they can take on a modern army. But then, of course, you will have a kind of asymmetric insurgency type situation like we've seen in Iraq, like we've seen in Afghanistan, and that's a much more difficult long-term problem.
The number of international players now involved in Mali seems to indicate that this may well be a long-term conflict. Though America has yet to be directly involved, its aircraft, alongside Canada's, have arrived with supplies for French troops. The West's military capabilities were given a further boost when, yesterday, Britain announced that it too will be sending 400 troops, which it says will be performing non-combat roles.
The role of British troops, as I've set out in my response to the question, is clearly not a combat role and will also not extend, as we envisage it at the moment, to a force protection role.
In Africa, where support for Western intervention has been strong, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Ghana and Namibia, amongst others, have agreed to support a mission by ECOWAS, the economic community of West African states. But as myriad nations pour into this multi-ethnic West African state, ethnic tensions which gave rise to this conflict continue to simmer. Credible reports have surfaced that the Malian army have committed atrocities against the Tuareg. It is hard to say how this conflict will play out. Will there be a quick end, or will other parts of West Africa be engulfed in violence? Will the opponents of the West be vanquished, or will they blow back and target Western civilians and cities? We have yet to find out. Amanda Thomas Johnson, Islam Channel.
So, what is really taking place in Mali? Is France being transparent about its military intervention in Mali, or are there other factors involved here? Is the West creating a new Afghanistan in North Africa, as many commentators have suggested? Or are we witnessing a resurgence of Al-Qaeda? And we ask, are African and Muslim countries not able to solve their own problems? Well, I want to hear your views on all of these questions. The phone lines are now open, so do call us. You can also tweet at us at hashtag YourViewsIC, that's IC for Islam Channel. Well, joining me in the studio to discuss these questions and respond to your views is Explo Nani-Kofi, Director of Kilombo Center for Civil Society and African Self-Determination, based in Ghana. Good evening.
Good evening.
And thank you for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, the first question to really ask is this French intervention in Mali. Is it really to help the Malian government to tackle the rise in quote-unquote Islamist terrorists?
You see, when the West talks about Islamic terrorists, one thing which is not made very clear is that what's being called terrorism is a creation of the West itself. Because they are talking about Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb being the mother of what they are referring to as terrorists here. And you know very well that Al-Qaeda itself was created as a result of the West's intervention in the proxy war in Afghanistan, where they were talking about resisting Soviet involvement in Afghanistan. And You remember in December 1991 when the Islamic Front won the election in Algeria.
That's right, yeah.
But the Algeria military, in collusion with the France and these same Western countries, cancelled the election. People who believe in election, people who every time it's election that they use in determine their own leaders. They cancelled an election because it had been won by the Islamic Front. As a result of that, various infiltrations and other things happened among Islamic groups in Algeria, and that contributed to the emergence of these so-called terrorist groups. And because of the corruption of even the Mali regime, they had a blind eye to these groups which they were using to counterbalance the Tuareg nationalists in northern Mali. So you can see that there isn't a genuineness in case of the Western intervention. Because of the way in which people are disempowered, some ordinary Africans in Mali may be saying that, yes, we need this Western intervention. But if, again, you go to the root of the problem, the reason why even there is the Tuareg problem is the Berlin Conference, the way in which African countries have been created by slicing particular groups among various countries. The Tuaregs, before Mali's independence, appealed to General de Gaulle for Tuaregs to be together in one country. And see, this is where I point out that the African countries have been created in such a way that they shouldn't work so that the external forces will benefit from this. And I say even in situations where there are people who speak one language and one dominant religion like Somalia, they'll still slice Somalia among Italians, French and British, so that there will be the proxy war situation.
And can I just interrupt you there, because I think you're absolutely right. The way the colonial deconstruction after colonialism happened has caused a lot of this problem. Let me just quickly go to our callers, take a couple of calls perhaps. I believe Ismail from Dublin is online. Assalamu alaikum, Ismail.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You're on air. Your views, please.
Yeah, my view is that, what is happening in Mali is a war that can never be, it can never be finished. In the aspect that, you see, these rebel people have been there for donkey years. You see, in Mali, Niger, and Algeria, all these rebels, they are not, particularly from Mali. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They are in the desert. You understand? Extorting money from people, smuggling cigarettes, smuggling drugs from that, from there into the nearest Arab country. You understand? So the problem now is that can they win this rebel? No, to me, because the more they were fighting them, the more these people, they will still be coming more.
Okay.
So what I think is that the other person was saying about the Tuareg, like they are part of they are part of Mali, they are part of Libya, and they are part of, even though they are part of Niger. And in the border between Algeria and Mali, there is a place called No Man's Land. There's nobody that has given these people any kind of support.
Okay. Thank you, Ismail, for your views. I think the point he's making is that these kind of conditions have always existed. And Explo, I think what you were saying just before we went to the callers about how kind of almost nations have been constructed in a way which traditionally were not accepted.
The roots of this problem. You get it? Because even these supposed terrorists, they are capitalizing on certain particular problems which exist. You see, the movement for the liberation of Azawad, which I think is talking about how to bring Songhai, Tuareg, Peul, Arabs who are in northern Mali together. That has developed over the years. It has developed as a result of veterans from previous rebellions being together with the new group of the cyberspace generation into the new movement, which is the movement for the liberation of National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad. But because there is that problem of the Tuaregs, talking about how they've been sliced into 5 countries, these supposed terrorists also take advantage of that situation. In fact, for the case of the supposed terrorists, the reason why I have problems with the West is as if the West intentionally creates these elements. So when there is crisis, they say they are going after them. But they have created these elements. You get it? Because it was out of the Algerian crisis that we started having these kind of groups. And you see, because the Tuaregs are in Algeria, Libya, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, anytime there's a problem, they can move in between. You see, when there was the famine around up to before the 1990s, 80s, most of the Tuaregs from Niger, Mali went to Libya and Algeria. They stayed there for a very long period of time before coming back to their homes. When they went there, they mixed with them, and when they returned in, I think, 1990-91, there was the second Tuareg rebellion. So you see that the way in which these countries have been created is at the root of the problem. And that is why some of us, whenever we want to deal with this problem, we bring in the issue of African unity. Because it's not only, if you even look at it, because of the kind of suspicions and other kind of unequal relationships which have been there before these countries were created, you can say the whole of the Sahel line, this whole of the Sahel is a fault line from Mauritania to Sudan. And like some people even say that because Southern Sudan had become a country by itself, it also encourages the Azawad people to say, yes, it's the same problem. It's the same problem that the Sahel fault line from Mauritania to Sudan, the Southern Sudanese have got theirs, so we also want ours.
Well, I mean, viewers do call in. We want to hear what you think. On this the French intervention, the way France has gone in. I mean, if you look at also other major conflicts that are taking place, notably Syria, where over 50,000 people have been killed, yet there is no appetite, it seems, for Western governments to intervene. I mean, that is a very obvious humanitarian crisis taking place over there. But in Mali, of course, we heard about the Tuareg and their capture of the northern parts of the country, but no one realized how quickly they would go to full-scale intervention, especially France.
Yes, that's why it raises a question. Africa seems to be the weakest link for these Western countries. In fact, I think it was under George Bush that the U.S. said they were going to increase the quantity of oil that they get from sub-Saharan Africa. So there has been a certain plan. I don't know whether it's because the resistance is being too hot for them in the Middle East. They've decided to work on Africa as the weakest link, so that they take these resources from Africa instead. And I think that is also part of the reason why these countries are intervening. And you see, although we are always talking about the French, it has not become a whole Western scale thing. Even Canada, which is not known usually to be one of the belligerent countries in the West, has gone in with facilities to support the French. And it is being said that Mali is now one of the greatest beneficiaries in terms of funding from Canada. Italy is providing planes, helping with transport. Britain is now saying that they are sending men as well, in addition to the planes that they're sending. US is bringing in advice, and we are hearing that they're even going to establish drone stations in Niger.
Yeah.
So you can see that it is even beyond the French. It is an ally, the whole of the West. The same way they sat in the Berlin Conference and sliced out these countries, they are sitting in that same fashion, trying to deal with this situation. And also because of the competition from China in particular now. And so...
The difference is in China's work, if you like, or kind of deals with African nations. There isn't any whiff of violence being used, whereas the West seems to be going in under the guise of violence.
Yeah, because they want to preempt. They are worried about the competition from China. So they just want to nip it in the bud. And they are using the same violence with which they intervened in Africa. You see, that is why when people talk about the new scramble, I always insist that it's not a new scramble. It is just developing the architecture for the Berlin Conference. The Berlin Conference has been there, the architecture to sustain the old scramble for Africa. Nothing new is happening. It's the same old arrangements that they are developing a structure, how to keep it going, and that is what is happening now.
So this realization, what you're saying, surely the African governments, do they not realize this? How comes, like, for the Mali government did ask the French to come?
That is why, for me, my point of indictment is the African governments. You see, these same African governments, they benefited from Trans-Saharan Counter-Terrorism Partnership, Trans-Saharan Counter-Terrorism Initiative, with the US providing funds for about 11 countries together with Mali to work to stop this terrorism. If their government's wealth is sought, no foreign power should have been coming into Africa. Africa should not even be there. You see, when the Organization of African Unity was being established, Kwame Nkrumah, one of the founding fathers, talked about African High Command. If we had African High Command, and our governments are actually governments, and we had African High Command, the US couldn't have had the arrogance of thinking of even establishing AFRICOM. So the fact is that because we have governments which are not governments, because we waste time electing people who are not representative of us.
Okay, Jawad, sorry, Explo. We've got Jawad waiting on the phone, so I'm just going to take a couple of callers. Jawad, assalamu alaikum from Manchester.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for calling. Your views, please.
Yes, I think Mali was a complete shock to most people. I think it's also been heavily sort of biased because we had a bunch of different stories going out there, and there's some very, very strange interventions. The fact that the UK is now being dragged into it is a huge shock. The fact that, the French got pulled into North Africa and basically we're heavily involved in Algeria, and now the UK Prime Minister is going there, is I think, a complete surprise to people. And we've had things which have been heavily misreported by the media. For example, there was a story a couple of days ago about all these manuscripts being burnt at a library in Timbuktu. And it turns out that actually they were not burned by the fleeing Mali rebels at all. They were actually saved well before, anything happened to them, and they've actually been, restored and very well looked after. So there's a lot of misinformation going on, and we don't really understand the motives for either our country being involved or France being involved, or why it was so pressing and urgent. It seems very strange that our Prime Minister has declared war on another country without there being any act of parliament. I think personally that's a huge shock to me, because the last time we declared war, obviously, we had a little bit of a problem in Iraq and maybe a touch of a problem in Afghanistan, and we're still there,
absolutely,
in many respects.
Okay, Jawad, thank you for your call. Let's take Ibrahim, who's also calling from Manchester. Assalamu alaikum, Ibrahim. Assalamu alaikum, Ibrahim. Assalamu alaikum, Abdul Ibrahim. Ibrahim? I think we've lost him. On that point about misinformation, we are coming up to a break, but we saw in many newspapers how this narrative about terrorists, Islamists, to the point where they said that, you know, they burnt so many books and everything else. It's almost to subdue the Muslim populations across Northern Africa in supporting this adventure of the West.
Yes, you see, if it is true that they didn't burn any books, then it's the way in which the West is going to trying to cut sympathy and also whip up people's sentiments against the jihadists, or to some extent against Islam. Because the way in which the West is approaching these issues is also from a certain angle, which is anti-Islam, making Islam something that people hate, that yes, it's Islam which is causing all this confusion.
Yeah.
But then the Islam is a dominant religion in Mali, both north and south. So Islam cannot be a problem in Mali in particular, because it's not that we have a Christian south and a Muslim north. That's not the issue with Mali in particular. And if this information that we get is not accurate, as the contributor has said on the program, then we have to ask, why is it so that the media is fed with such inaccurate information? Because if this inaccurate information will only strengthen the West's occupation, which they are pushing.
Yeah, you know, no, absolutely, and also the way for, I mean, like Jawad mentioned, you know, the prime ministers in North Africa, it surprised a lot of people. It's almost like, you know, it is actually going to war.
Yes, as I was saying, the fact that when Algeria created conditions which had led to these supposed terrorist groups, the West colluded. So they have been working together with the Algerian intelligence services in creating this situation. Obviously, he's gone there to go and contribute towards creating more of the mess.
So it's a continuation of what took place probably from 91.
1991, okay. The West has been colluding with the military dictatorship in Algeria, and for any...
Explo, let me stop you there, because we're coming to a break. And viewers, we want to hear your views on the second half as well. In particular, about this narrative about it being anti-Islam and Islam being scapegoated for all the problems that are happening there. What are your views on that? We'd like to hear about it as well. And of course, don't forget, you can also tweet us, Your Views I See. See you after the break.